The Pigcast, brought to you today from Wiggly Wigglers, Lower Blakemere Farm, Herefordshire, the company that sort of do the archers but real. I'm Heather Gorringe.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Farmer Phil, Oinker Keeper in Chief.
Smooth, babe, smooth. The thing is, what I'd like to say is thank you for listening in a lot. And a special new welcome to all our listeners that have come from Country Living magazine. Listener figures have gone whoosh.
Is it? Really?
Anybody who doesn't know what whoosh is, obviously it's a trend upwards. And so welcome to you. If you'd like any topics talked about, anything that's not controversial at all, anything bland that you'd like spoken about, don't bother emailing. But otherwise, if you want to get involved in the Wiggly Wigglers podcast, email
Richard at wigglyWigglers.co.uk.
And Farmer Phil, who is pwg@lowerblakemere.co.uk.
or Heather at wigglyWigglers.co.uk, or better still, we haven't mentioned this for a while, but you can ring the farm phone, which is outside the UK, +44 1981 500 930. And you'll probably get, when you phone, a little snippet of a podcast because we put the podcast on our answer phone at the moment. And the other thing is, if you're enjoying the podcast, the thing that is just new now is the podcast awards. But I don't know what category we should go into. But if you go to www.podcastawards.com and you like us, please would you nominate us for a category. Michael says don't go for general, so we'll go for general. But yeah, if you'd like to nominate us, that would be just wonderful, because they are the ones to win. And of course we are part of the Blueberry Network without an E, and we forget to mention that often, but as they sponsor the podcast awards, now's the moment. We are Blueberry. Rich is looking at me like I'm mad.
Yeah, well, you are mad, but yeah, Blueberry. What is Blueberry?
Well, it's a network of podcasters which has got a community feel rather than just a directory. Right. So if you wanted sponsorship, you could get it through Blueberry. But they're good old boys.
Yeah.
And Rob Safutu, who we did the New York Minute show with in New York,
right,
he has become a director of Blueberry, so I'm quite sure that they're doing something wonderful that I don't quite know.
Okay.
But they're definitely a very positive influence on podcasting.
Right.
And most people who have done more than one show and are not into pod fade are part of the Blueberry Network.
Excellent.
We got a email in from Julie Nicholson, Farmer Phil, who says, really enjoyed your Leaf Open Day, came away totally inspired, loving your podcasts too.
Excellent. Well, that's the sort of response we can live with, isn't it?
And obviously, due to customer data protection, I can't share with you what she's ordered from Wiggly Wigglers. Suffice to say, I do think she's got a slug problem.
Right.
So hope your lettuces are all right, Julie. And we got something else in, which was a review on Podfinder UK, which is the BT Pod Shows programme, and you can find that on podfinderuk.podshow.com. And apart from the fact they say we're in Hertfordshire and that they say we make your garden safe, it's a really good review.
Are they saying it's safe though? Is that because it's a trendy expression, safe? Or is it safe as in, you know, it must be because it's cool. In with the kids.
Oh,
safe.
Really? So anyway, last Friday we had a mission, didn't we, Phil?
We did, yes. You didn't believe I ever actually sorted out, I don't think. But anyway, last week was a packed week and Friday morning was the only morning left. And so we set off on a trek to Gloucestershire.
To do what?
To get the pigs.
We like
To
Gloucestershire.
get the piggies. So we just went out and we just had a look at the old glorious little pigs.
We have, yeah. And just to briefly recap the reasoning, we were fortunate to go on a visit to the Duchy of Cornwall home farm, Prince Charles's home farm, over at Tetbury. And David Wilson, the manager there, among other things, keeps Tamworth and large black pigs.
Right.
And we having heard his thoughts on rare breeds and pigs and mixed farming and so on, I've always wanted a pig. And so we inquired as to whether he would sell us a couple of pigs, and he said absolutely he would. And so Friday morning we set off with our cattle trailer, which, as you can imagine, was plenty large enough for 2 small pigs. And we drove over to Tetbury to meet David at the home farm and to pick up our pigs.
And he is on the way. I've known Phil for a good 20 years now. Would you think that was fair, Phil?
I would say so, yeah.
And in all that time, when his father was farming and since, he has spoken about 2 things that he would like to see on the farm. The first was giraffes up on the bank, which we won't be achieving today.
I think my trailer might be a bit short for that.
Why do you want giraffes up on the bank?
That was Father's idea. He's always fancied the idea of having a giraffe.
Right. Anyway, there won't be giraffes up on the bank, at least today at Lower Blakemere. But the second is that he's always wanted some pigs.
That's true.
How come?
I don't know. I've always liked pigs. As a child, I visited some friend of my parents' farm where they had pigs, and the fact that they oink and squeal and they've got huge characters just always appealed to me. And I suppose thereafter, because Father said we couldn't have pigs, that only enhanced the appeal.
And why did Daddy Gorringe not want pigs?
Basically, years and years ago, when we first started farming on our own account, we did actually have pigs. We had some fatteners, and it didn't go very well. It was the trendy thing at the moment was to fatten pigs in your cattle yard through the summer, and they got some horrendous diseases and something else, and it was all very depressing. And so that experience, I think, scarred him slightly, and also the pigs' preponderance for grazing at about -3 inches doesn't do the field a lot of good, and that was his ongoing excuse, I think.
So the upshot is that now you're farming on your own, and today you're off to get your pigs.
We're off to get, but they're not just any pigs. We're not going off to get a lorry load of pink squealers. We're off to get some special pigs.
Go on.
Well, they are going to be rare breeds pigs. Well, they are rare breeds pigs, and the plan is to have 1 Tamworth and 1 large black. And they're both, you have to forgive me because I am a very novice pig keeper. I've just been reading my DEFRA How to Be a Pig Farmer guide that they kindly sent me this week. But we're going to have freshly weaned female pigs, so they will be little females, and then we will fatten them over the summer, and then we will take a decision as to whether we breed from either of them or we will slaughter them for pork at that point and probably have some more then.
And you and I have been talking about the fact that we'll only have 2 pigs currently, and it's important that we don't treat them as pets, although we're both, want to have pigs. We like pigs, don't we? So it's quite difficult.
I think it's very important, and it's probably as important for Monty as it is for us, that we remember that if we make them into pets, then there is no way that anybody's going to feel comfortable eating their pet, and therefore we have to take a commercial view. I know that's a horrible phrase, but we have to steel ourselves to the principle of what we're doing before we allow it to get into a situation that is just miserable for all concerned. It won't be easy anyway, because it's not a terribly enjoyable thing sending your stock off for slaughter to eat, but it is a fact of life. It is a necessity of eating meat, and I am totally happy and confident that the pork that we produce will taste absolutely fantastic, and there is the thought that without eating the pork there wouldn't be the pig.
And the for those listeners who have noticed my lisp, I apologise for my lisp, but my bridge at the front of my teeth has sheared off the teeth, and I am a toothless fairy.
The trouble is that if you will engage in scraps in the car park, you know it can all end in tears.
So anyway, we're on our way to Highgrove to meet the pigs and bring them home. We've got the truck, the trailer, we've got toast and jam, and I have my tooth with me, ready for the dentist to fix on the way home. So hopefully this podcast will go from toothless to tooth-filled and pigless to pigged out.
Or pigged in even.
Pigged in, yeah. And just to add to that, we had an email in from Neil Foley, pod chef, and whose website is kitchengardenfoods.com and gastrocasttv.com, and he says, great to hear about the piglins. Congratulations on the big step, you'll love them. Just remember to name them after MPs or other farmers or cuts of meat. Head out every day and tickle them under the belly, scratch their jowls, and remember what great crackling they'll make and how nice those hams are becoming. Will ye be getting old HFW?
HFW?
Hugh Firmly Whittinstall
Right.
to come by and give ye stamp of Britishness on this venture. Great podcast moment, and also that would turn me green with envy. There's a link he's got on his kitchengardenfoods.com to see his pigs, and he says, I completely understand your qualms about not wanting to eat what you know, but think about it. How can you not? With the food in the market that you don't know, what happened to it? Where has it been? Far from being the carnivorous savage some of my listeners feel I am, I actually have a tender spot for the animals I raise. I over-pamper my hens, cattle and pigs, and they have a great life, the knowledge of which makes them all the more delicious. The first time it's hard to send them to slaughter, but keeping focused on that from day one helps. It gets easier after a time. If you want to save rare breeds, you have to eat them. My 5 girls, 2 around Monty's age, all know this, and they look forward to the products of our efforts. The youngest one is a positive savage, counting the days till she can have some brisket. Our last batch of sausages barely lasted long enough, and the Christmas ham will have to be a whole one this year, because he smokes his ham in his own smokehouse.
Oh, wow.
Can't wait to hear about the crackling good fun. Great stuff. All the best. Neil Foley. So
Well, that's excellent, isn't it? That's exactly the thinking, I think.
Yeah. So we were just talking this morning, weren't we, about whether or not you think it's a good idea to give them names. So you decided whether you might give them names.
I haven't.
My inclination is not to.
Right.
I don't like to give the calves that we send off for beef names,
Yeah.
and I don't particularly like it when Monty wants to. I don't think it helps.
No.
But having said that, that doesn't stop you having a relationship with them and realising that they're all different characters and so on. But I think his most relevant point is set the agenda from day one and stick to it.
Sure. Well, I think it seems like you've psychologically prepared yourselves to kill the little piggies in a few months' time.
Well, to me, the thing is, no pork, no pigs.
No.
So that the act of eating that glorious crackling and what have you is what is going to sustain the pigs, and in our case, the rare breeds concerned. So if we don't eat them, there's no reason to have them.
And it will taste nice as well. That's the thing. And they do
fantastic.
look quite tasty now. And actually, when we're talking about, I'm still a bit peckish. When we're talking about pork scratchings and brisket and things like that, I think, oh, you know, I could definitely tuck into those little guys.
I tell you what we'll do. Next week we'll have a vox pop, because you know I'm like a radio journalist now, aren't I? You know, I'm just like a DJ.
Right.
And a vox pop is where you have to ask loads of people, isn't it, about stuff. So we'll have a vox pop with the team about whether or not we name the pigs, because there's a lot of excitement about Wiggly Wigglers, about the pigs, and a lot of controversy about whether or not they are actually going
Mixed
to
opinions.
indulge.
Mixed opinions.
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest worries is that it means that there's an awful lot of people I'm going to have to share the crackling with.
Yeah, yeah. It's not within your psyche, is it? Givingness.
Well, thank you for that, Rich.
What are you talking about? That's a pot calling the kettle black if ever I heard anything.
Earlier on,
there we go.
Richard, and I quote, he said, if you get as far next year as breeding some pigs, he said, I might buy some. And I'd like to put the emphasis on buy, because Rich is not keen on buying anything.
You're right,
That's very
Rich.
unfair.
Because you've been quite kind this morning to several people, including Michael.
That's just this aura of love that's in the air at the moment. You know, I
think it's that new shirt you've got on.
Do you think so?
Yes. Listener, he's not in pink today. He's in a sort of do you want to dance shirt, aren't you?
Yeah, well, it's a
little dance.
It's an unusual. It's not unusual necessarily. It's the shirt that I rarely wear. Yeah.
Was it a tablecloth once or not?
No. The others. The others are.
Yeah.
On that note, let's go to Home Farm and hear, hopefully, I recorded a few cockerels, because when we got there, they were cock-a-doodle-doing and a few oinkers snorting, and we'll hear David Wilson, who, to me, is a very inspiring farmer who's been organic for the past 20-odd years and manages the farm at the Duchy. David, thank you so much for coming on the Wiggly Podcast. I'm not sure if you know what a podcast is, but I think your sons do.
They do, yeah. They'll put me right.
Yeah, absolutely. We came round Home Farm a few months ago, and I found your talk completely inspiring with regards to organic farming, and in particular your attitude to rare breeds. Can you share with our listeners what you would like to see farmers doing with regard to rare breeds and why it's really important?
Okay, well, rare breeds, as you know, are fun to look at. They're different, and there's a sort of novelty value to them. Just because they're different from the sort of run-of-the-mill standard livestock that you tend to see on farms today. But the serious note in keeping rare breeds is that you're preserving their genetics. Now, we depend nowadays on fewer genes than ever for our food, because control of breeding, etc., whether it's plants or animals, is carried out by fewer and fewer huge global companies. And as a result, we've lost a very large chunk of our food genetics. And in the last 100 years, we've lost something like 75 to 90% of our food genetics. And it leaves us in a very vulnerable position. So, in nature, genetic diversity is a strength, and mankind is doing the complete opposite. So whatever happens, even if they're not the sort of current flavour of the month, we shouldn't let those genes disappear. So that's why these pigs that you're taking away may not be, they carry a lot of fat. They're quite a different sort of pig to a modern pig, but you can bet your bottom dollar we will need some of those genetics for the future. And it's not just an issue with animals, it's an issue with cereals and vegetables and all of the other foods that we eat. And it's up to us really, as farmers and growers, to keep those genetics alive. Even if we just grow one unusual breed of lettuce or carrot or potato, or keep one rare breed of livestock, it's almost our duty to do it, because in a way our future depends on it.
So the argument against that would be that presumably farmers have tended to pick strengths in particular breeds. Excuse my lips, listener already knows why.
Yeah.
They've picked the strength, and therefore, for example, you go out on a dairy farm and you see Friesian black and white cows, don't you? Everywhere. You go out to a pig farm and you see those white pigs, and you go to a cattle farm and you see the Friesian crosses. So they would argue, wouldn't they, that they've been picked because they are, I don't know, maybe they grow fastest or they are vigorous?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, if you look at why we've selected particular genetics, it's normally about more. So whether it's more meat, more milk, more wheat, it's more weight, which theoretically equals more profit. What, of course, is interesting today is we're producing more milk per cow than we've ever done. We're producing more wheat per acre than we've ever done, and yet we're losing. Farmers are probably losing more money than they've ever lost. So that actually doesn't add up at all. But what's tended to happen is decade after decade of breeding for more means we often leave behind some of the more subtle genetics, but we're unaware of that until we actually get many decades down the line. And again, that's a good reason for at least keeping some of the older genetics. Genetics are really complex. When you're trying to select for, say, high milk yield in a cow, you're probably losing something else, but it's not immediately apparent, and that's the key point about it. And it's definitely an area where we should operate, if you like, the precautionary principle. We should not race ahead, let everything disappear, and that applies to all of our food throughout this planet.
Before I ask you about positive future farming, what, in your opinion, could be the worst case scenario of if we do let the rare breeds die out and the genetic pool become less diverse?
Well, for a start, I think it will make the choice of food that we have and the flavours that we have really boring, because it'll be the same everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably lose some of the finest flavours that we've got. I mean, they're part of our cultural heritage, and the reason they're there is for good reason, because they taste really good, but also because we lay ourselves open to maybe a particular disease or disorder or genetic imperfection by narrowing down this gene pool. So you may have a particular, this is just an example, but if you had a particular variety of wheat that was fantastically heavy yielding, but it suddenly succumbed to yellow rust or something like that, and you didn't have the genetics to enable yourself to grow something more resistant, you'd be up a gum tree. And the same principle applies with dairy cows. You've got cows now that are producing phenomenal amounts of milk, and yet they're producing because they're producing so much milk, they can't actually maintain good health because they're genetically programmed to produce so much milk. Now, you can't blame the farmer for that. It's the situation they find themselves in, but the long-term effects of that are not good.
Now, you've been an organic farmer, well, you tell me, for ages, really.
Well, we have. I mean, I've been involved with organic farming for 22 years, and I came here as from a conventional background, and I didn't know that you could actually grow food without using vast amounts of fertilisers and pesticides, etc. But 22 years down the line, we know it works. There are many other thousands of organic farmers who also have discovered that it works and can work within it. And I would say the word organic and sustainable are interchangeable. And we know that our future lies in producing our food sustainably, because if it isn't sustainable, you can't go on doing it. That's what sustainable means. So it means eventually there will be an end to it. So sustainable production is the way forward, and I think organic farming provides a model of sustainable farming, and it's something, I suppose ultimately if you try and wind things right forward and think about how things will be in the future, and I think ultimately the population of the planet will be governed by the amount of food that we can feed it with that has been grown sustainably, because if it isn't sustainable, we can't go on doing it, as I said just now.
So have you got a wry smile on your face that actually there is a wave of enthusiasm and opportunity, or what's your take on the future of farming?
I think we are at a crossroads in terms of certainly farming and food production, but also I think civilization is at a crossroads, because we know we're at the point of peak oil now, so the lines between consumption of oil and production of oil are parting company. So we've got to look at other methods of producing energy. We know that the production of ammonium nitrate is extremely energy hungry, and we know that something like 53% of the energy used in conventional farming is used in fertiliser manufacture alone. So we know we've got to look at other ways of producing our food. It's as simple as that. So, part of me feels quite excited about the future. But I still feel it's an awfully long way to go, and that it's, we are still governed. All of our systems, the way we live our lives, are actually dictated by money, and that because that overrules everything at the moment in the way we judge everything, the way we measure everything. We've still got a long way to go. But in fact, if you whittle it down and really think about the basic facts, where money governs everything, it normally will end in tears. It can't go on, benefiting mankind. So we need to look at other ways of judging stuff. And I certainly think food is obviously vital to us, and it's the basic industry of mankind. We can't survive without it. So we've got to look after it, and we need a healthy, vibrant agriculture to have a healthy, vibrant society. The two go hand in hand, and where agriculture is not in a good state, then society, as sure as eggs are eggs, will follow.
What is my pig going to taste like?
The pig will taste fantastic. The reason it'll taste good is because you'll notice when you see it, it carries more fat, but if you look at that fat, it's a very pure white fat. And it's the fat that gives it the flavour. And it's a real melt in your mouth fat. I mean, if you thought of it more almost like cream or butter, you may think of it in more favourable terms. But it is, it's a really good quality food. One of the problems with the modern hybrid pig is because we've become so obsessed with getting rid of fat, we've got a type of fat, although there's less of it, that is not very pleasant to eat. They call it lacy fat, and it's something they're trying to deal with. The pig breeders are trying to deal with now. And also the lean meat is rather dry. So, often if you get a supermarket pork chop, it's not the nicest experience. This is totally different. It's in a league of its own. And for me, that fact alone is a reason to keep the breed going.
So am I going to eat this fat and get fat?
Well, I don't think you will, you see. I mean, there's a lot of myths surrounding fat, and I think what you get when you eat good quality food and good quality fat is actually it satisfies you and keeps you feeling full for a very long time. So there are many that would argue that you actually end up eating less. And what is wrong is eating lots of sugary foods and very fast digestible carbohydrate, because it gives you all these highs and lows which make you feel incredibly hungry, desiring more of the same. So I'd say no. Look at the Western Price website and it'll tell you all about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for especially inspiring one conventional farmer to become very enthusiastic about our new pigs and rare breeds, because that was really a trigger point for a conversation all the way home from the Dutchy farm that day, which might not be much, but it's certainly generated an enthusiasm to encourage the genetics to be diverse, from our farm at least.
Great, fantastic. Well, good luck, and may we sell you many more.
Thank you. Off we go with our oinkers.
So, having interviewed David with her lisp, we're then on a very tight schedule to get Hev back to the dentist to get her teeth put back together, so that we could actually understand whatever she was on about. So we set off at a vast rate of knots, dropped Hev off at the dentist, and installed the pigs, well, temporarily at first, at any rate, in the cattle yard.
Rach said I was a tussless fairy.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
which
quite nice.
I took as quite a compliment.
Yeah, it was, yes. That's quite a nice thing for him.
Anyway, there we are. Ginny Hurlock says, I'm with Phil on hedges, but so agree with Ricardo on cats. Hideous, pooing, spraying, fighting, screeching, mating, killing machines that they are. And then she says, sorry, Noah. On that note, if you listen into next week's podcast, we're going to have James, the Nuffield scholar, who is going to house our pigs, or maybe just provide a house for our pigs, which will be named as the Pigloo. Thank you, Mary, for that idea. And we've also got coming up on next week's show more from Ginny Hurlock and lots more for you to listen to. So bye from me.
Bye.
Bye from me.